Thank you for your patience, and I want to thank everyone for joining today. This is a co-hosted webinar between Heidi Health and Blueprint Solutions. Today we have myself, Jenny. I'm a training manager here at Blueprint Solutions, and we have Arthur from Heidi Health to show you the Heidi Health platform. And we also have Tony and Laura from Grayson Stadler, who's going to help demonstrate how Heidi Health works during the live consultation. Here is a quick look at today's agenda. We are going to kick things off with Arthur, who's going to give you an in-depth tour of the Heidi Health platform. This is going to be followed by a mock consultation featuring Tony and Laura, with Heidi Health actively listening so you can see how the platform functions in real time. After that, we're going to shift over to the Blueprint side of things, and we're going to show you how to sign up for the free 30-day trial of the Heidi Health program and walk you through how to launch Heidi Health widget directly from Blueprint OMS. We're going to wrap up this session by going over a few commonly asked questions we've already received regarding this new integration. A quick note before we do begin, this session is being recorded and will be available for viewing later this week, so you'll be able to revisit anything that you might have missed or want to review. Since we do have a large number of participants today, we've got members of our team monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to drop them in there and we'll do our best to answer them as we go. Also, just make sure everyone stays muted and turn off your cameras just to help with the internet connection. And we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen at this time so Arthur can take over.
Thanks, Jenny, and hey everyone, great to meet you guys and have you guys join the webinar. Before I share my screen, I'll actually give a very brief overview of what Heidi is and how it works. And so we're essentially a medical AI scribe who would take into the conversation you have with your patient and then help create the note afterwards. But it's not just a progress note that we can help create, we can also be kind of pulling for the full workflow. So the pre-charting, any education summary, referral letters after the visit as well. And I'll show how we do all that in Heidi. So I'll share my screen here. And the purpose of my demonstration here is really walking through how Heidi works unintegrated. And then shortly after, we'll share how it looks like with Blueprint OMS with the Heidi integrated version. So sharing my screen here. What I'm showing you guys is actually Heidi in our website. So on the unintegrated version, you can access Heidi 3 ways. One, you can use it by the website, which I'm showing you here. 2 is a desktop download app, so it's really good for telehealth. And then lastly, the third would be a mobile app, so either iOS or Android. And then just to orient you guys on what you're seeing here before we jump into the live demo, the left-hand side here are going to be different settings, different preferences you can customize. And then right above that is going to be your templates and your template library. So Heidi works by taking in that conversation, all that audio info, and then afterwards creating a structured clinical note using a template. So whether you want the subjective to be at the very top, whether you want all the symptoms to be as part of the subjective, whether you want the exam findings as a separate section below that, and then lastly the A&P, you can customize this app to be more fit for purpose. And I'll get into these examples and how we actually do this in a second. But beyond the template library, so if I click into my template library, when you actually sign up for Heidi, you can choose your specialty. So if you choose your specialty as an audiologist, you'll actually be provided with this audiologist note here right from the get-go that you can use and start transcribing visits, creating notes afterwards. Beyond your specific template library, there's also a template community. So this is where providers all over the world, different specialties, different use cases, will upload theirs for public use. So for example, GPs in the UK, psychiatrists in Australia. And then if I were to filter in the specialty for audiologists, I can see there's already a good bit of templates made available, including one that I've uploaded onto Heidi specifically for Blueprint. So when you get started on the unintegrated version, what you would click would be this top left black button called New Session. It would open up this blank screen, and this is where you'd go to create a note, transcribe, and kind of listen to the patient. That button would be the screen Start Transcribing. Before I click this and jump into the live demo, 2 things I want to call out is that One, you can always change what the template will be, what the note will look like, either before or after the conversation. And you can also change the brevity of the note. So whether you want it to be a standard scribe, an extended scribe, or change how detailed you want this to be, whether it's very brief or also super detailed, which tends to include patient quotes as well. The second aspect I wanted to call out is beyond kind of this customization of the note itself. In this context tab here on the top left, you can include any prior information about the patient. So you could copy paste their medical history, their prior chart note. You can also attach any documents. So maybe a patient is coming to you from a referring physician and they give you a letter about what's going on. You can upload that letter, and then Heidi, given the context, understands that letter is all of the past history about this patient, the reason why they're coming in today, and I'm going to mold that with the actual conversation to create a more structured and rich note. And then lastly, we can also pull forward patient sessions. So from the initial visit, we can also pull forward for any follow-ups too. And then later on, we'll show what this will look like in Blueprint in your OMS by being able to actually push the note back to the right fields. But with that being said, I'll pass it back over to the Blueprint and Laura on their end to kind of introduce themselves and share a little bit about what this live demo will actually look like.
Thank you, Arthur, and that was a great overview. My name is Laura Prigge. I am the Manager of Education and Training at Grayson Stadler.
My name is Tony Lombardo. I'm an audiologist with Grayson Stadler as well.
And Blueprint asked us to come and do just a little bit of a role play because we both have practiced in retail and medical settings for many years before our positions at GSI. So we're just going to walk through a basic intake and then evaluation. So let's get started.
Mm-hmm.
Tony,
yes.
What brings you in today?
Well, unfortunately, I haven't been hearing as well as I should for a while now.
Oh, do you remember? Like how long? How long have you been having trouble?
It has to be at least 3 or 4 years that I've been at least noticing it.
Is it in one ear or both ears?
I think it's in both. I can't tell the difference really.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit more about this. So, does it fluctuate your trouble hearing, or do you think that it's kind of consistent?
No, I think it's pretty consistent. It's mostly when I'm in crowds or like when people aren't facing me. Like it's like I can hear them talking, but the clarity isn't there. It just seems like everybody's mumbling.
Okay. Do your friends and family notice, or is it just you?
No, they like to make fun of me sometimes when I make a mistake, but to be honest with you, it's kind of frustrating.
I understand. Okay, so talk to me about this. Do you have any pain in your ears?
No pain.
And do you have a history of like ear infections or any medical issues with your ears?
No, not that I can remember. Nothing as an adult anyway.
Okay, is there any family history of hearing loss?
Yes, my mom has hearing loss.
Was it caused by something medical or?
I think, no, she didn't work around noise or anything. I think it's just runs in the family.
Okay. Do you have any ringing in your ears?
Yes.
Both ears? Can you
ears.
describe it, please?
It's a high-pitched, constant ringing that I've had for probably about 8 years, and it seems like it's getting just slightly worse over the last couple of years, like the last year or so.
All right. Well, you know what? This looks good. Let's go in and test your hearing, and then we'll see what the results are.
Great.
Okay. We are completed with your hearing test, and so I'm going to go over the results with you.
Okay.
When you were listening for those tones, we were looking for your thresholds or the softest sounds that you can hear, and we developed an audiogram, and I'm going to explain that. So an audiogram is a graph of the softest sounds that you can hear, and the way that it's set up is across the top for the frequencies or the pitches. Starts off really low like a man's voice and goes up in pitch until it's really high like a bird chirping. Starts off really soft at the top of this graph, and as you go down, it gets louder and louder. So 120 is like a jackhammer or a jet engine. Now, your results are here. The red circles are your right ear. The blue X's are your left ear. And you can see that normal hearing is right here around 20, 25 dB. Your results are showing that in the lower frequencies, your hearing falls kind of within that normal range. So you don't have trouble hearing some of those sounds like A, E, I, O, U, things like that. But here in the higher frequencies, you have what we would call a moderate to moderately severe sensory neural hearing loss. And what that means for your hearing and your communication is that you can't hear the clarity of speech. So earlier when you said you had trouble, like people were mumbling, that makes perfect sense according to your hearing loss. So You can also see that your hearing is symmetrical, or both ears are almost the same. And what we would recommend is that you are a great candidate for hearing amplification. Have you ever considered hearing aids before?
Well, I haven't considered them, but if they'll help me, then I would certainly be willing to give them a try.
Okay, now there are a ton of different styles of hearing aids, and because you have such good hearing in the low frequencies, what I would recommend is a receiver in the ear. It actually goes over your ear, the hearing aid itself, and then there's just a little wire with a receiver or the speaker that goes into your ear canal. So what we also need to talk about is which level of amplification. Like, what are the goals with these hearing aids? Like, what is the most important communication priority for you?
Sure, I would say that it's probably just to be able to hear better when I'm in a group or a crowd, and then also being able to listen to the TV at a volume that's appropriate for the rest of the family as well.
Okay, perfect. I think they'll all appreciate that. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and order you up some hearing aids, and we'll check back in a couple of weeks and see how you're doing.
Thank you.
Great.
So we'll create the note. And then I do want to also call out that I'm using right now the audiologist note that you'd be able to use when you set your specialty as an audiologist in Heidi from the very get-go. And so I'll just briefly scroll through the note and let the folks here take a look at what the output actually came out with. So we have the subjective, we have a bit of the objective, so the actual exam that was discussed, and then lastly, the assessment and plan. We'll pause there for a little bit for you guys to kind of read through. And then what I'll do is I'll show you exactly how we actually create these templates to tailor out to each individual. And then separately, when I was mentioning earlier, beyond the main note, we can also do kind of the pre-charting workflow, the core note, as well as any downstream document, which I'll show in a sec as well. So given the note, the way that we create these templates is just using a mix of really basic English and a bit of syntax. So I'll click these three dots and I'll go to view edit template. And this will pull up the template that I talked about a little bit earlier. And yes, I'm seeing in the chat, we will cover the cost later on in the remaining of the seminar. But for the note itself, the way that we create this customization is we use a bit of English and a mix of these brackets and parentheses for full customization. So brackets would be content or aspects in the note that you actually want to see. And then lastly, parentheses are going to be instructions to tell Heidi, this is what I want you to do. Imagine Heidi's a third-year resident in the corner of the room and you're saying, hey, Heidi, I want you to write the notes in a narrative form. I want you to make sure you include X, Y, Z. So for example, on the left-hand side, in the subjective, we have presenting complaints and duration in square brackets. So what this means is if I'm the audiologist and I'm talking to my patient and the patient's mentioning any symptoms, complaints, and how long it's been happening, all the information will then flow into this square bracketed space specifically for the presenting complaints and the duration. And then in instructions, in parentheses afterwards, I'm saying, describe the main concerns, symptoms, and their duration in detail. So I want to make sure there's detail to whatever the patient is saying and what the note will actually look like. So just using a mix of these brackets, parentheses, and just writing out in English what I want the note to look like, we can create full customization. So it doesn't have to necessarily be tailored to all audiologists, but per each audiologist, maybe I have a preference, maybe Laura has a separate preference, maybe Tony has a completely separate preference. We can make it more fit for purpose on an individual basis. So similar to the actual note itself, beyond the main note, we can also create any downstream documents. So let's say maybe I want to do a referral letter to Dr. John. And then Heidi will create that ask, that document tailored to this specific visit and the information with the patient and provider. So Dr. John, I'm writing to refer a patient who's been experiencing bilateral hearing difficulties for the past 3-4 years, and it just creates the full note this way. You can apply the same logic to creating an education summary for the patient in layman's terms, an order summary for a new hearing aid, maybe a follow-up check-in in 2 weeks. You can really be very, very creative with how you want to use this and kind of imagine how this would fit in your workflows. And to your point, Chris, yes. So after you create this note, you can actually just type directly into this if you want to make direct edits. And then separately, if you wanted to add in more info, you can also just dictate directly in. So by clicking this microphone button, I can dictate into Heidi, very similar to using Dragon. And I'll stop dictating there. So I'll pause there, and then of course, if there's any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. And what I'll do is I'll actually shift it back over to the Blueprint team to share a bit more on how this would look like in the actual system in the OMS, and calling out that this is the unintegrated version. With Blueprint, with Heidi integrated into the OMS, there'll actually be a push note back to the OMS button that will flow all the sections back to the corresponding sections of your note.
Hey, Arthur, real quick. Henrik is hoping that you could show the difference between the detailed versus short version of the note, so that way we can kind of see how that works.
Yep, definitely. Definitely, we'll show that. And then I'm just reading this question here from Alex. Has there been any challenge with transcription accuracy when speakers have low volume or unclear speech? That's a really good point. So what happens when you click a new session on the integrated the website version is you'll notice we have a mic indicator here in the top right. So the bars will be moving as I'm speaking, as well as the bars are green, which means that one, the mic is connected, and two, we're actually capturing audio. In some instances where if the audio is extremely muffled or it just sounds like you're underwater, there is a potential that the transcription may not catch. We'll still do our best to grab the context for what's discussed, but obviously we would recommend having a very clear audio, having clear conversation as opposed to muffled and very quiet sound. And then in a case where it can't fully interpret the full sentence in real time, it'll also, given the context, kind of fill in based off of what was discussed. But to the prior point, so what I'm using here is a very detailed prose. If I wanted to change the brevity to something more brief, I can click brief, and the note will generate afterwards. And brief tends to use very short bullet points, very short sentences, as opposed to full narrative, full sentence length. So for example, right, the objective, very straight to the point, assessment and plan, also very straight to the point as well. Something new that we have in pipeline as well is we have tasks here on the right-hand side. So essentially what happens is in the conversation, let's say maybe I'm the audiologist, I say, okay, Arthur, let's schedule a follow-up for 2 weeks. Let's make sure within the next 2 weeks, we'll order you a new hearing aid and we'll make some adjustments. All those tasks that you as a clinician need to do will pop up here on the right-hand side. And right now it's more of a checklist just to help remind and kind of share more info about this specific visit and the things that you mentioned as next steps for the patient. And then separately, I see a very important question here, which we'll also get to later on, as to where is the data stored. So in each region in the US and in Canada, we have specific server per region. So US specific data does not leave the country, Canada specific data does not leave Canada as well. The other aspect is beyond kind of the brevity of the note, you can also change what the scribe will look like. So for the majority of cases, I'd recommend using the standard scribe. This is very straight to the point, a very fast model. So whatever the patient says, whatever you as a provider say, it'll create a summary based off that. The extended scribe is more so for very complex behavioral health or potentially mental health related conversations where they could go for an hour, hour and a half, and it's more of a qualitative discussion. That's where that tends to shine a little bit more because it draws a bit of inference and complexity to the conversation. On the flip side, though, because it does draw that complexity, it runs a little bit slower than the standard scribe. So for the majority of use cases, I would recommend using the standard scribe and then just changing the voice to whether it's brief, Goldilocks, detailed, or super detailed. You can also customize out the detail. So maybe you want medium detail, but you also want bullet points, quotes, and abbreviations. This would just be your quote unquote custom voice. With that being said, though, I'll pass it back over to the Blueprint team to show off how this would work in the OMS.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Arthur. While we get everything switched over for the screen wise, I know Laura and Tony here just wanted to share some of their thoughts on this integration.
Absolutely. I saw a couple of the questions coming in, and they were obviously the same questions that I had when you guys invited us to join this webinar. Specifically, one of them that came in I saw was about the low volume and about if they're mumbling kind of. One of the things that I noticed, that Tony and I noticed when we were working with Blueprint, Henrik was one of our subjects, I would say, and he doesn't talk softly, but there's definitely an accent, and it was able to pick up and transcribe his accent really accurately. And then the other thing is we used a couple of different microphones in our practices. Obviously, we wanted to make sure that we were very clear for the webinar, but we had one where we were using just the webcam microphone that was just on the webcam. We had one where we were just using the computer one, and it seemed to be pretty accurate on all of them. And I did see a comment that said they put their iPhone in their pocket and they were using their iPhone and it was capturing almost everything. But I think that once you guys, if you implement this and you push record, you'll sort of get, you'll be able to figure out your setup. And also I wanted to say, and I'm sure Tony would echo this or say it instead of me, it was pretty impressive the way that it transcribed the words that we were saying.
Yeah, I would say that as well. Like the first time I saw it, my mind was really blown. I was so impressed with the accuracy and how well it stayed in the audiology realm and, you know, didn't mess up terms. It was, and just watching it today again as it was transcribing ours, I was pretty blown away by it. It almost makes me want to go back to practice again.
Well, and the other thing is, I mean, I know that I spent hours and hours and hours trying to remember the conversations that I had with my patients because I never had time to do my charting or my notes at, right when the patient was done. And so with this, I didn't have to remember, oh man, was this the guy with the grandkids or was it the other guy that had the boat accident or whatever the case was. So this would be a huge time saver for me.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you guys. All right. I am actually now going to take over and show you the Blueprint side of things. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing our video. And I am going to hop back into our system. First, we need to know how to enable Heidi Health. So to do that, we'll need to head into our setup menu. And in the setup menu, you have a new category, Heidi Health. Only users, let me pull this up, only users with the maintain Heidi Health config privilege is going to be able to see this particular category within the setup menu. Once you click on it, you just need to select the enable Heidi Health integration button here, and you will be prompted with this privacy notice. I'll let you guys it might be a little harder to see on your end, but once you go to enable it, you'll be able to read it on your own time. And if you would like to proceed with this integration, you'll just need to select the yes option. The next prompt here is the getting started notice. This is just a helpful tip, reminder to prompt you guys to move on to the next steps of what you should do to get going with this integration. I do want to point out, it might be, again, hard to see on your screens just due to the size of this. There is a note here saying each user will need their own Heidi Health account under Heidi Health's Together plan. This is just stating that each Blueprint user is going to need their own Heidi Health account, so you cannot share a Heidi Health login to all of your different Blueprint OMS user logins. Now, once Heidi Health has been enabled in your system, any user that needs to be able to launch Heidi Health is also going to need the Use Heidi Health privilege as well. All right, so with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and go into a patient file here so that way I can launch the integration. So there are a few ways to be able to launch the integration. One way is in the patient's journal, there is a Launch Heidi Health button in the lower right-hand corner. When you select this, it will prompt you with a journal entry type, and you can select whether this should be displayed in audiology, as well as the date of entry. Once you've entered in all of your parameters, hit the Start Entry button. This takes you to the Setup Your Heidi widget. So I'm going to hit the Continue in New Window, and this is going to be the process of to start that 30-day trial or to start your integration with Heidi Health. All right, so giving it a few seconds here to think. So you can either, if you have a Heidi Health account, you can go ahead and sign in with that now, or if you need to create one, hit the Create One button at the bottom. You'll need to enter in your basic information, such as your name and your email. Oops. And then your clinician type. So you can go ahead and select audiologist from here. And this is where the system or Heidi Health will know what pre-selected templates can be saved to your account based off of this clinician type. Now enter in your country based off where you are located and hit the Join for Free option. You are sent a code, so give me a few seconds while that code hits my account. So once you've verified your email, go ahead and set up a password. And then you accept the policies. So on the next screen here, again, this is how you set up that free 30-day trial. You just need to select the Start 30-day trial here. And this does go over the pricing for you. It might be a little hard to see on your end, but this is where that would show. And give it a few seconds here to think. And the nice thing about this is you don't have to enter in credit card information. So if you forget to cancel the subscription, you're not going to be charged since we didn't put in a any credit card information. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the Start Trial option. And now my account has been linked with my Blueprint OMS account. So I can either stay on the Heidi web or use Heidi on your integration. I'm just going to go ahead and go back into Blueprint so that way I can show you a few other places that you can launch the Heidi Health integration. So the first way that we discussed was launching it from the patient's journal. However, you can also launch it from the scheduling tab. So right-clicking on a patient appointment, you can create a linked Heidi Health entry right from here. You can also go into your patient browser, select a patient, and go to the patient dropdown to launch Heidi Health from here. All right, I'm going to go lastly, if you go into a patient's audiology tab, anywhere that you can create a linked journal entry, you can also create a linked Heidi Health entry. So right-clicking on an audiogram, I can create a linked Heidi Health entry right from here. So I'm going to go ahead and launch Heidi Health from my audiology tab and pull this over for you guys to see. And this is what the Blueprint OMS and Heidi Health widget is going to look like. You can see we have our patient information. It's going to auto-populate with their first, last name, gender, and their date of birth. And if there was a previous visit open in Heidi Health for this patient, that note would actually show up down here for you to see. We're also going to go ahead and do a quick 2-minute follow-up with our guests, Tony and Laura, so that way you guys can see how this integration works in real time. So to start, we're needing just to hit the start visit button, and we're gonna go ahead and get started.
All right, Tony, it has been 2 weeks since you got your new hearing aids. How's it going?
Well, I would say really, really well. At first they were kind of a little bit sore on my ears, but now that has kind of gone away. I'm getting used to hearing some of these different sounds I haven't heard quite so clearly for some time. But for sure, my friends and my family have definitely noticed that that I'm hearing better, even though they can't really tell that I'm wearing them because they are pretty invisible.
Okay. What was the most surprising thing that you heard this week or these last couple weeks?
I think it was the most surprising thing was being able to hear when I wasn't facing a person. Like just being, I was shocked at how clear actually the speech was, and I was accusing them of mumbling all the time. So I feel bad about that.
Oh yeah. Okay. So is there anything that was frustrating this week?
I would say the only frustrating thing was just kind of getting used to this new habit of, putting them in every day and remembering to do that kind of stuff. But it's rapidly getting very, very much part of the routine because they do work.
Good. All right. Well, what we're going to do is run a reeler measurement, see if we can maybe bump you up a little bit closer to the target. I know we started a little bit softer last time just so you could sort of acclimate. So let's go ahead and run a reeler and see what adjustments we can make, and we'll come back in a couple weeks and check again.
Thanks.
Great.
Awesome, perfect. Thank you guys. So let me just go ahead and stop the video and pull on back. So once that is finished, you can go ahead and select what type of note that you would like. You can see that since I picked that clinician type audiologist when I was setting up my account, that audiologist note does appear right away for me in my note template section. I'm going to go ahead and select that, and now Heidi's doing its thing and is generating that note based off the conversation that it picked up. Now, while this is generating, you can see up in the top, I can actually resume the conversation if needed, so that way we can pick up where we left off. And you can now see the note from here. I'm going to just zoom in a little bit for you guys to see better what this says. So I can see over here on my right-hand side, I have my scribe information. So if I wanted to do my little bit more detailed notes, I can do the bullet point options. All of the things that Arthur showcased, I can do from this widget as well. So go ahead and select that so that way I can see the note generate here. And here is all of that information using the new scribe. Now we also have the Heidi Health button down in the bottom left corner. So if I wanted to make a referral note off of this, I can also do that from here. I'm gonna go ahead and just zoom out a little bit. I can also change that note option from here. So note template, I'm gonna switch it over to this SOAP template type and let that note generate so that way you guys can see how this is done in real time. If you need to update any of the information, you can do that by typing or clicking into the note, making the adjustments that you see fit. And now once everything has populated the way you would like, down in the bottom right corner, we have the push note button. This is what is going to push this particular note back into Blueprint OMS. So let me go ahead and select that. I get a little successful option here. I'm going to hit OK and head back into Blueprint. So head over into the journal here real quick. And we can see here is that new note from today. Let me double click to pull that open for you guys. And here is that information that we just pushed into our patient file. You can see that it does have the display and audiology checked off because I did originate this note from the audiology tab. So if I hit cancel and head back into my audiology tab, here is that linked journal entry note to my audiogram. All right, so that is the demonstration for the widget side of Blueprint OMS and Heidi Health. So I'm gonna head back into our slideshow here, so that way we can start with the question portion of this webinar. So first question here is, what version of Heidi is required and what is the cost? Let me go ahead and hand this over to Arthur, so that way we can get that answered.
Yep. So for the first part of the question, what version of Heidi is required? The version that's available online, so on the website, the desktop app, as well as with Blueprint, is going to be the most updated by default. And then the second aspect, what is the cost? So with Blueprint, the integration is going to be 1199, so 1199 annual per user per person. But separately, like Jenny mentioned, there's going to be a 30-day free trial, so definitely try this out, see how it works for you in your clinic, in your workflows, before deciding to purchase and make that decision making later on.
Awesome, thank you, Arthur. Are there any Blueprint OMS related costs? And I can answer that for us. No, there's no cost on our end. This is just a cost to Heidi Health. The next question that we've gotten is, do I need patient consent to record the patient session? Arthur, would you be able to talk on this point?
Yeah, so two answers to the question. One is, would always recommend grabbing patient consent from the patient, just saying, hey, I'm going to be using this AI scribe called Heidi. Do you consent for me actually recording and listening to the conversation? The other piece is, which I actually linked in the chat earlier from a message in the chat, was we also have resource explainers, so templated out patient explainers, consent forms, clinic materials. What I've seen with some clinics is actually they'll either include a line in their intake form just saying, mark this if you consent to the scribe being used later on. And then also in the actual clinic waiting room, they may have post-its or some sign saying, we're going to be using this product, this device, just as a heads up. And then when they actually see their patient, they'd ask for explicit consent afterwards. The other piece to the question is around kind of data, the implication around data compliance. So Heidi itself as a platform is HIPAA compliant. We're SOC 2 ISO compliant as well. But the way that we work is we actually don't train our AI models off of any patient or provider information. And the reason being is the models we use are static. So all the information that you're recording to create the notes, it's not being used for any kind of data processing, data manipulation purposes. There's no third parties interacting with that data, nor are we selling it off. It's just stored in-house. And you as a clinician, if you wanted to erase that session, you could do so, and it completely erase all the data associated with that visit from our servers.
Awesome, thank you, Arthur. The last question that we've gotten quite often is, can I continue Heidi sessions between multiple devices? And the answer is yes, you can. Let me go ahead and move to my next screen here. So continuing Heidi sessions on multiple devices. So we have a workflow set up that you can start a session from your computer. And if you have the Heidi Health app on your phone, you will be able to actually go onto your phone, find the session, and continue that session from that cellular device, and then also be able to see that information that was picked up on device B, as you can see in this diagram. And you can review it on device A, so that way you can push it back into Blueprint OMS. All right.
That was a question for us.
Yeah, I think Arthur. Henrik said that there was a question in the chat that may be related to what you have. Let me go ahead.
Yeah, which question was that? There's a lot of things going on in the chat.
Premium,
Great.
premium version of Heidi. Does Heidi together cost include the premium version of Heidi?
Yeah, so there's 3 tiers on Heidi. I'll share actually the pricing. I'll share a couple of resources in the chat. So one, I'll share back that resource center with the templated out consent forms, explainers, all of that. And then I'll also include our pricing information separately. But essentially with Heidi, there are 3 different tiers. So there's a free version where if you sign up as an audiologist, you'll be given that H&P, the SOAP, that audiologist note, the template that's tailored to your specialty when you sign up out of the box. And you can use that unlimited times, no cap, no restriction. You're just limited by how customized you can create the note. And then also there are no integrations with Blueprint. There's another paid tier called Heidi Pro, which is more for individual self-service. So that's at $7.99 annual per user. And that has the customization that's able to create downstream documents, customize out the templates, create custom notes. And that's also unintegrated with Blueprint. And then lastly, there's a Heidi Together plan, which is $11.99, so around $1,200 a year per person, which is integrated with Blueprint and has all those features where you can customize things out, create templates, and separately for teams, you can also share templates across the team if that's the case as well. But for the purpose of this webinar, when we're talking about Heidi integrated with Blueprint, that would be at that Heidi Together tier, at $1,200 annual per person. And then for folks in the US, the pricing is US dollars, 1,200 US. And then for folks in Canada, the pricing would be $12.99 Canadian.
Awesome. Thank you, Arthur. Just wanted to answer a few other questions that are popping into the chat here. So there was a question, does the session have to be initiated in Blueprint to go to the phone? And the answer to that is yes, it should be initiated in the Blueprint OMS. Push it from Blueprint OMS into the Heidi Health widget, so that way it appears on your phone, so that way you can continue the conversation between the computer and the phone.
Yeah. And then a couple questions more on pricing here in the chat. So based off of different countries you're going to be in, if you actually go to that pricing page I link and you change the location, so whether it's US, Canada, UK, EU, Australia, if anyone here is over there, I don't think might be midnight for them over there, but UK, EU, for example, you can change the country of origin and it'll give you the pricing based off of that.
I do see another question here. I can only see 15-day free trial. So the 30-day free trial has to be initiated from Blueprint OMS. So if you go to launch Heidi Health through Blueprint, then you are able to get that 30-day free trial. All right. I also have the Blueprint solution and the Heidi Health contact information on the screen. So if you guys do have questions later on, or if you'd like to reach out to learn more, feel free to use the emails or to call the direct line for Blueprint to get some more information on this new integration. Should be able, yep. Wanted to, again, thank you all for joining us today. And I'd like to send out a special thank you to Arthur for taking the time out of his day to do this joint webinar, and to Tony and Laura here to being our volunteer guests. All right, we are going to go ahead and wrap this up. So again, contact information is on the screen, so feel free to take a screenshot of that so that way you can use it for later on. This session is recorded, so we will be sending out a recording of this later on in the week, and it will be made available to you all. All right. Thank you, everyone.